Hey everyone, Camille here from 88 Fitness Training. Welcome back. Thanks for tuning in today for this glute hypertrophy video. This was actually a special request from one of our subscribers, Travis. So thank you, Travis, for this request. So I'm going to get into the top 3 criteria to consider when training glutes, and we're going to apply that to the 5 top exercises. So the number 1 criteria that you want to think about in terms of hypertrophy is creating mechanical tension, right? So that means applying a force to the muscle fibers. And you really want to do this and take your time doing this to create the stimulus that's needed for muscle growth. And it's really important to apply that mechanical tension when the muscle fibers are stretched. So I'll show you in the exercises coming up how exactly we do that. But number 1, creating mechanical tension. Number 2 is creating muscle damage. So this happens anytime that you're applying enough stimulus to create little micro tears in the muscle fibers. This leads to adaptation, which means growth, y'all. And so it's really important to emphasize the muscle damage, which is caused by the eccentric portion of the lift, the negative portion of the lift. So, all right, number 2, muscle damage. And the last criteria we're going to talk about, number 3, is metabolic stress. So this occurs anytime you're applying enough stimulus that you're creating a byproduct, lactate, right? So we really want to produce that lactic acid in the muscle fibers, which causes cell swelling, leads to anabolic signaling, leads to growth. The number 1 exercise when it comes to growing a pair of glutes is going to be barbell back squats, y'all. And it's not going to really matter whether you have high bar or low bar. There's pros and cons for both ways, but it's going to be really important to hit these squats, get good stretch and depth in the squat, and then shoot up, producing this force on the glutes. So let me just go ahead and show you a couple here. All right. So you really want to focus, get down in the hole, squeeze the glutes, and back up, just like this. There is nothing that provides this much stretch on the glutes, right? You can argue all day long whether other exercises like hip thrusts or leg press work the glutes, but the number 1 glute builder is going to be the squat. You're getting a lot of stretch through the glute muscles, and you're able to apply that mechanical tension to the glutes while you're deep in the squat and really focusing on that eccentric as well as the concentric. So in terms of providing mechanical tension, creating that damage to the muscle fibers by progressively overloading, it's going to be really important. And then when it comes to creating that metabolic stress, as soon as you start training higher rep ranges, more of like the 8 to 15 versus the 6 to 12, you're creating that metabolic stress that leads to adaptations. So number 1 exercise, barbell back squats for the glutes. The next exercise is going to be the deadlift. So this is a compound movement that works multiple muscle groups, including the glutes, y'all. And that is essential for overall strength and posterior chain development. So when it comes to mechanical tension and we're talking glute activation, they're a very hip dominant exercise. So that involves a high degree of hip extension. And during the deadlift, the glutes are really working hard to move those hips. And that's what's creating that substantial amount of mechanical tension. So conventional deadlifts are great, but when we're talking specifically glutes, there is a variation that I give the edge to, and that's going to be the Romanian deadlift. So let me show you what this looks like. So you're going to put a slight bend in the knees, let the hips pull backwards, get that nice deep stretch across the glutes and hamstrings, and then extend the hips up. So let the hips push back, stretch, and squeeze, just like this. So remember when I said mechanical tension, it was really important to focus on being stretched while under load. That's what me and James always said is really perfect for muscle hypertrophy. Well, the Romanian deadlift is giving you that. It's really placing a high degree of stretch across the hamstrings and the glutes, more so than the conventional deadlift. So this is why the RDL is where it's at when it comes to building a set of glutes. All right, up next we have the hyperextension For glutes though, y'all, we're not doing this for back strength, we're doing this for glutes. And I failed to mention in the beginning, I'm actually presenting these in the top ranked order from best, not to worst, but from more effective to less effective. So first you have your squats, then your deadlifts, now we're over here with the hyperextension. All right, so to do these, especially for the glutes, which we have a lot of videos, I'll try to toss up some cards for this, we want to put the feet against the back of the platform. We want our hip crease right in line with these pads, and we're going to come down, getting that deep stretch across the glutes. You want to contract them, and then come up and squeeze, just like that. So down, get a deep stretch, contract, and squeeze. All right, so if you start to feel your lower back, you really want to make sure that you hunch your back a little bit, driving more of that load into the hamstrings and glutes versus coming up into a back extension. And as you're doing this, you never really want to go past the plane of your body, right? Like right here is good. We don't want to be up like this. You're going to feel the lower back. So keep that back slightly rounded and in line with the rest of your body. Just like that. All right, the great thing about these is you can actually progressively overload. So you can grab a weight plate and do this as well. So I've got a 25-pound plate here, just like this. Now, a common thing I hear is like, yeah, Camille, that's great, but why is this better than like a hip thrust where I can do 135 pounds? Like I can't hold 135 pounds. Yeah, that's true. There's gonna come a point where it's like, I can't hold all those weight plates and do this. But if you are out there doing research, there's a great guy out there, his name is Dr. Soko. He actually recommends doing them single-legged if you get to the point where you're that advanced that you can't hold the weight anymore. So I'll show you what that looks like. So you basically are just gonna take a foot out of there, come down, and crank up using just one leg. I'll switch legs for you. So just like this, and then same thing. You can grab that weight plate and start all over again, making it a new way to progressively be overload. So thank you, Dr. Soko, for that tip for everyone out there that was wondering how do you keep progressively overloading it. But this exercise right here, the hyperextension for the glute, it is providing a tremendous amount of mechanical tension on that glute. It's in the stretch position, and man, you can crank up the reps, right? Like you can definitely hit the 8 to 15 while holding weight and create that damage. So, all right, y'all, number 3, hyperextension, work those glutes. Next, we have hip thrusts. Y'all, if you guys can move any sort of weight, there's no purpose of doing these body weighted, right? Like we talk progressive overload is important. So yeah, you could do it body weight. You could maybe even work isometric contractions in there. But at some point, you're gonna have to load up that barbell and perform this hip hinge exercise. So grab your bar. You wanna drop the hips down low and then come up flat like a table, really squeezing the glutes, just like this. So really take your time. The barbell is really great for progressive overload. Like you can really crank up the weight. Just make sure you're still hitting the same range of motion. Like a lot of times you'll see like this partial thing. It's almost like barbell hip pumps. Make sure you're dropping those hips all the way down, coming up and squeezing just like that. And really focus on that eccentric part, the lowering squeeze. Take your time lowering. Get that stretch across the glutes and back up. Now with hip thrusts, I always think it's a better muscle activation exercise than it is as like a strength or hypertrophy exercise. But you know what? Muscle activation can lead to hypertrophy because the more you can control and activate those muscles, the better off you are when you're trying to build muscle size. So crank up the reps on this one. Like definitely you want to be closer to the 20 rep range on the hip thrust, and it makes it an excellent exercise. But again, it's not going to beat your squats. So if you're going in there saying hip thrust is where it's at, I don't need a squat, that's a huge mistake. Like definitely work them in, but it shouldn't be the main target in your glute program. The last exercise that I recommend in your program, which I don't have a machine here to do, is hip abduction. So that's the outer thigh machine. So this is a really great glute isolation exercise. You're really going to be working that glute and applying that tension to it. And for this one, same thing, like you're going to want that higher reps, so that 8 to 15 reps, and really control the eccentric. So get those legs out, placing tension on those glutes, and then take your time bringing those legs back together. It's really nasty. And you can even do like forced reps where you use your arms to help get the legs out and then control that negative portion of the rep as the legs close back. But you're putting that direct tension on that glute, creating that damage, that trauma we talked about. So it's a really great glute builder. All right, y'all, let's cap this video. So again, thank you, Travis, for this request. He requested a glute hypertrophy video. So I talked about my top 3 criteria for glute hypertrophy, right? So it was creating that mechanical tension on the muscle fibers, like really cranking it up and making sure that we're doing this in the stretched position. Number 2, we talked about creating that metabolic stress, right? Like we want that lactic buildup in the muscles, and this is done by applying higher reps. So on every other body part, we talk about the 6 to 12. When we're talking legs, we got to crank that volume up just slightly. We want to do higher reps, and that allows for more anabolic signaling, which is going to lead to growth. All right, and then number 3, we talked about muscle damage. This is the trauma that James always talks about, right? Like we want to create those little micro tears in the muscle fibers to lead to adaptation, which leads to growth. So make sure whatever exercises you're doing that, you're prioritizing those 3 criteria when you pick them. And so I went ahead and did the hard work for you, y'all. I just went ahead and told you what exercises that is in ranked order. Number 1, squats. If you want glutes, squat. You have to squat. And then from 2, we talked about doing deadlifts, specifically the Romanian deadlifts, because of how much stretch it applies to the glutes and hamstrings, right? From there, we went ahead and did the hyperextensions. Don't do back extensions, do hyperextensions for the glutes and hamstrings. And don't think for a second that you can't progressively overload this, y'all. Like when it becomes too easy or you can do 20 reps, go ahead and grab a weight plate. Keep holding weight plates until you can't hold them anymore, and then take the Dr. Soko approach and do them single-legged and start over. So it's a really fantastic exercise. From there, number 4, we talked about the hip thrust. Don't fall into the social media hype where they believe the hip thrust is the number 1 exercise. It's not. I'm here to tell you it's not. It's squats. But they're still really important. It's a really great hip hinge kind of exercise. It's a compound exercise and really easy to overload. So get your hip thrust in, but don't prioritize them in your glute program. And then lastly, one of my favorites, the hip abduction machine. We don't have one, but most commercial gyms have one. It's the outer thigh machine, and take your time. Focus on the eccentric part as those legs are coming back together. And I guarantee if you work these 5 exercises into your leg program or your glute program, you're gonna grow those glutes. So thanks for tuning in. Make sure you catch us live every Sunday at 12 Eastern. It's your opportunity to interact with me and James in real time. Get any questions you have answered. So definitely tune in this upcoming Sunday. We hope to see you there. All right, y'all. Camille, 88 Fitness Training. Like and subscribe.